morning, afternoon, or evening, or nighttime. Today we're going to do a quick one. As you may have noticed, I have been unavailable for the past month or so due to a bad wrist and elbow tendon injury. I own a crystal shop, or two, or three, in Southern California, and so I do a lot of lifting of crystals and heavy materials at odd angles. And I had to spend some time off to recover. Today we're working in gouache, and I'm working from my car, so you can see my little lap set up with the Etchr Slate Mini. I just throw it on my lap. I have all of my stuff ready. One of the things that I'm going to change is that I have my gouache in the tin, and as you can see, I have some piles. And then I also use the tin for doing mixing. The good thing is when I open this tin, there's already pre-mixed grays and mixed in colors, so everything pretty much has harmony. If I have a specific type of color that I'm going for the scene, I may clean it off or use a new sponge, but most of the time I will use the same sponge and I'll just try to get it to go in the color tone that I'm looking for. On the top right, there's also a palette, which is from Amazon. It's pretty inexpensive and it's a wonderful palette. That palette holds airtight gouache. I want to switch that soon because I found that I can just put the gouache straight onto the tin or other area, and that will do the trick because the tin keeps everything wet. However, all of my whites have molded so far after a couple days of non use. I do keep my paints in the freezer when I'm not using them because it helps prevent the mold. But if there's mold, it can only stop it from growing, it can't stop it from existing. So I recommend if you're not going to paint for more than 24 hours, throw your items in a freezer. And if you can somehow just keep them going, just make sure you paint every day so that it doesn't get moldy in the first place. I also use exclusively purified water. So even though you can see now I'm blocking in some clouds, I'm up here at Signal Hill in Long Beach. I use purified water for my paints. I use purified water to spray my sponge, which is a cellulose sponge, also from Amazon.com. So I'm doing this as simple as possible. I tend to put a wash of a acryl gouache that's by Holbein that is called bright red, I believe. It's almost orange, but it's a little brighter than their burnt sienna. So this is what I like to put a wash because I love when it shows through underneath, as orange happens to be my favorite color ever. And I think it contrasts beautifully with the blues. If you have a wash in the background, a lot of people recommend yellows for sunny type of pictures. Most of mine right now, as you might know if you live in Southern California, are not sunny because we've got Seattle going on here. So basically, I moved to Seattle and I didn't have to move at all. But anyway, it's overcast, and that means my shadows are going to be pretty warm. So when you're doing a painting, there's one major rule that I follow, and it's probably the only rule that I follow, and that is if the light is warm, like a direct sunlight, the shadows are cool. If the light is cool, like a shady or something like the nice blue interior lights, the daylight light bulbs that they have now, then your shadows will be warm. So keep that in mind. And if you can tone your painting before you get started, I use acryl gouache so that it doesn't pull up when I'm painting. Because if you use regular gouache, it will pull up and mix into the other colors as it gets reactivated as you add them. So here you can see I'm blocking in the tree, which is closest to me in the preview picture. You can see it there on the bottom left-hand side. It's kind of a sagey green, so you'll notice that my color that I used for it is almost just gray. And I've got the purple at the bottom. I have not been using gouache because I can't hold my painting and my brush at the same time. I've had to use my left hand to use the brush because of my right arm is injured, which is my dominant arm. So I've been using my left hand to paint, and I've been doing mostly oil, but I haven't been able to set up my camera or anything because of my injury. So I will start recording new videos as soon as I get the go ahead from my occupational therapist, who is awesome, by the way. Big shout out to Five Hands. I think it's called High Five Hands in Garden Grove. They are phenomenal, and within just weeks, I wouldn't even believe that I had had an injury at all. So if you're suffering, don't suffer. Their price is extremely great. There's no awards for suffering. I don't use insurance, so it's really inexpensive, though, for what it is. Just go get it fixed because you know what? You're worth it. And it will make your life so much easier. So here you can see one of the things that I started doing is using a lot of yellow ochre. I'm trying to use more of that. But when you're farther away from you, so anything that's farther away from you has more atmosphere. So anything that's in the distance, like mountains, the sea, the ocean, trees, you name it, it will have less yellow in it. So you'll notice that most of my yellows are staying towards the bottom, which will be the closest to me. I want to indicate that there is some buildings going in a line towards me, but I am not too careful about it because my main focus on this one is actually the clouds, and later you'll see the ship also became my main focus by the end of this painting. I am doing the artist trading card size, and I'm using the illustration board. This is actually how I found out I love illustration board for gouache. It doesn't soak in the gouache as much as watercolor paper does. It's a lot like the Etchr sketchbook tends to not soak in too much either, and the illustration board is great too. So this is my regular Etchr sketchbook. The one that's called the Perfect Sketchbook does tend to soak in my colors, but it is nice, and I love painting on it anyways. However, I'm here on the illustration board. You can see my clouds at the top. How the tops of my clouds are warm, the bottom is in the same color tone as the distant island that you see in purple there. That's in person, this looked very purple, and so did the clouds. The bottom of the clouds really matched that tone, although you can see it's a little bit lighter. I've gone ahead and separated them a little more from the background. The other thing you want to remember is that with gouache, it's opaque. So if you put down lines and they're not the way you want them to, you can throw in opaque right over them. And if you really need to, you can go in with water and kind of erase. You kind of take your brush and really carefully kind of jiggle it right on top of whatever you're trying to erase. And after you jiggle it a little bit, it'll start to pull up. Then wipe it off, then jiggle it with clean water, then wipe it off. Be careful about how much water you use. You don't need that much water. Here I'm putting the ship in. I love this ship. There's always ships in this port because it's Long Beach. Probably more now since they're currently protesting. Go union workers. I highly believe in the power of, you know what? If you can't afford to pay your workers a fair living wage, then you can't afford workers. That's my theory. And as a business owner, a small business owner whose biggest expense is employees, I still stand by it. So there you go. I just got that little ship in there, and I love it. I don't know. I feel like it was so fun to draw. I love ships, and I love trains, and I love cargo, like everything. It's my historical side. And as you can see, when I get closer to me, I'm adding more vibrancy to the colors. I'm adding more contrast, so things get lighter or more detailed as well. And those little things, sometimes they get lost in the end painting, but I still like to put them in just for fun. Little highlights, showing off those buildings. One of the things that I don't show too much here is my color mixing, but one thing you got to remember is I have a bunch of colors already on my palette. I wanted to really highlight right in front of that ship, and it worked out really well. So I have a bunch of colors basically on my palette already. The good thing about that is that none of my colors are going to be just plain purple or plain green or plain yellow ochre, because they're going to be mixed in with whatever's currently on my little sponge, which I think is great. It adds a lot of color harmony as well. Just trying to make this look a little bit more like a tree, because right now I think it's a little bit small. I use mostly a 1 inch brush. Sometimes when I do the artist trading card size, I use a 3/4 inch brush. I love using these trading cards because they have a mat available and they're only like $1 for the mat and they look very professional. I will be at Dana Point this Sunday, June 11th from 10 to 4, and I have an awesome setup which includes a lot of these trading cards for only $30, which is really cool. And they come with the mat, so I love the way they look. I'm putting away my stuff, and you can see how fast and easy it is. My water cup was up on the left side. I clip it to my bag, so that's the first thing I take off so that I don't spill it everywhere. And then I just fold everything up, flip it over, and zip it. I love the Etchr slate. I use it now for oils and gouache, and it's the best. Here's the view from beautiful Signal Hill. This is Long Beach, from the top of Signal Hill, which is where I parked my car. They have a great park over there. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful night.